2 hours after my boss slammed her hand on the table and fired me. SilverPoint Systems was collapsing in on itself. I could hear it in the voicemails piling up on my phone, shouting in the background. Alarms, someone crying, and Tessa Ward's voice breaking as she said, "Elara, we need you. Please call back. This is catastrophic." I stood at Pier 62 in Seattle with the wind pushing off Elliott Bay, cold enough to sting. My phone buzzed again, another voicemail, another voice begging. Then Callum Pierce's frantic message appeared. "Elara, this is urgent. The whole system froze. They said you... Look, just call Tessa. Right now, please." Callum, the same golden boy son of the chief executive who did not know the difference between a server and a search bar, now sounded like a child who had lost his mother in a store aisle. I let the message play out. He rambled, stuttered, then hung up abruptly when someone shouted his name in panic behind him. My name is Elara Wynn, and 2 hours earlier, I had walked out of SilverPoint's 27th floor conference room with nothing but a cup of cooling coffee, a shaking heartbeat, and whatever dignity I had left. Pier 62 creaked under my shoes as I stepped farther out toward the water. I could almost feel the tension radiating from the device in my hand, as if the phone itself were begging me to answer. Instead, I slid it into my coat pocket. Their collapse had nothing to do with revenge. It was what happens when people in power confuse convenience with competence, and if the system was falling apart without me, that was simply the truth catching up to them. A ferry horn echoed over the bay. I inhaled slowly, long enough that the cold air settled into my chest. I knew I could not avoid what came next. Even if I was not ready to hear Tessa's voice or see Callum's name appear again. 2 hours ago, they believed I was finished. But the unraveling had started long before their first voicemail. It started that morning, in the glass-walled conference room where everything truly broke. The morning had started quietly, the way trouble often does. I had barely taken 2 sips of my coffee when Tessa Ward appeared beside my desk, her expression tight enough to cut glass. "Elara, conference room 4. Now." Her tone was clipped, formal, not a request. When I stepped inside, Callum Pierce was already there, leaning back in a chair like he owned the room, tapping at his phone with the careless confidence of someone who had never been told no in his 24 years of life. He looked up and grinned. "Morning, Elara. Big day for me. Dad says I'm stepping into AI operations." I stared at him, waiting for the joke. "AI operations, Callum. You struggled to log into the sandbox environment last week." He shrugged. "That's why you're here." "Right. To get me up to speed." Tessa closed the door sharply. "Elara, enough chit-chat. Here's what's happening. You will train Callum from scratch. Fundamentals to deployment. Whatever he needs." I felt the words hit like stones. "Tessa, I'm overseeing 7 critical initiatives. The statewide analytics rollout is days from testing. I can't drop everything to babysit. It is not babysitting." Her voice hardened. "It is accommodating the chief executive's family, and you will do it." "No," I said, calm but firm. "Callum needs foundational classes, not private tutoring. I will not abandon our deadlines for a vanity appointment." Callum laughed under his breath. "She's really saying no." "Wow." Tessa's face flushed deep red. "You do not get to refuse. I am refusing because it jeopardizes everything we have built. There are millions of lines of code here." Her hand slammed the table so hard the glass vibrated. "Then you are fired. Effective immediately." The door swung open as if the sound had carried straight through the entire floor. Heads turned. Conversations froze. Callum pushed his chair back with a smirk. "Guess I won something today." I straightened my spine, picked up my untouched coffee, and walked out of the room without another word, exactly as empty-handed as Tessa believed me to be. What do you do when the people who depend on your work are the same ones who tear you down in front of everyone, Ms. Wynn? We need you to come with us. Frank, one of the security guards, spoke gently, but the meaning was sharp enough to scrape bone. Roberto stood behind him, avoiding my eyes. Tessa appeared in the doorway with her arms crossed, a triumphant curve tugging at her mouth. Make sure she only takes personal items. No company property. I walked ahead of the guards, feeling dozens of eyes follow me through the open floor. Conversations dipped into whispers. Someone tried to offer a sympathetic look, but Tessa's presence cut it short. At my desk, my monitor was still glowing. I reached to finish the email I had been writing to a state compliance officer, but before my fingers touched the keyboard, the screen went black. A system alert popped up for a fraction of a second. Access revoked by IT. Tessa leaned against a cubicle wall. Swift work. Right. We cannot risk you walking out with anything proprietary. Her words slid across my skin like ice. I opened my top drawer and pulled out a small cardboard box. Frank stepped closer, checking every item as I placed it inside the chipped mug with the faded keep pushing forward print. 3 worn notebooks, and a framed photo of my father taken a month before he passed. That's everything, I said softly. Tessa raised an eyebrow. I expected more, but maybe that is all you ever had here. I closed the box without responding. She did not know the truth that inside the middle notebook, tucked between 2 pages of notes, sat the original administrative schema for the Learning Core framework, my framework, the one owned by Wynn Analytics, the tiny LLC I created during my father's treatments, when I needed control over my own work just to stay afloat. SilverPoint had leased it for years. I was the only administrator trained to manage it. When I walked toward the elevators, Tessa smiled as if she had already forgotten my name. I stepped out into the cold Seattle air with a cardboard box pressed to my chest, looking every bit the defeated engineer she believed me to be. What happens when the asset they thought they owned suddenly slips out of their hands? By the time I reached my apartment in Queen Anne, my hands were numb from carrying the cardboard box. I set it on the counter and opened my laptop with the kind of dread that settles in tight lungs. The system logs flashed immediately. License pings, one after another. Wynn Analytics. License validation? Failure. Retry. Failure. I whispered to myself. You never renewed them. Tessa, I warned you for months. There was no trace of satisfaction in my voice, only exhaustion. My father's voice echoed in my memory, the way it used to when we worked late at the dining room table. Build things that stand without you but always know when they shouldn't. I had written that in the margin of my notebook, back when hospitals and bills were all we talked about. He had been a systems engineer his whole life, but he believed in protecting what you build, even when no one else sees its value. I stared at the logs. The framework was doing exactly what it was designed to do. No renewal, no access. Still, the sight made my stomach twist. I had no salary now, no insurance. My mother's treatment cost more every month. People like me did not get to relax into unemployment. My phone buzzed. A text from Jonah, one of the youngest developers on our team. Jonah, Tessa is saying you took company property. She's telling everyone this is your fault. A moment later, another message. Jonah, they're scrambling. Everything's breaking. They won't admit they ignored your warnings. I pressed the phone to my forehead. For a moment, I felt like crying, but the tears stayed where they were. I had not sabotaged anything. Nothing I built was meant to harm anyone. But I could feel the ground shifting under my feet professionally, legally, emotionally. The logs kept flashing. More failures, more expired tokens, more pieces of SilverPoint unraveling because no one there had listened. How long can a company survive when the truth begins to leak through its own lies? By 8 the next morning, my phone was buzzing non-stop. I ignored every message until Jonah finally wrote, "They're doing the Port Authority demo without you." My chest tightened. That demonstration had taken months of preparation, and the Port Authority was one of SilverPoint's largest municipal clients. Still, I did not respond. Whatever happened in that room was no longer my responsibility. 10 minutes later, Jonah sent another message, short, frantic. "Elara, it's bad." I opened the live meeting link he forwarded. Callum stood at the front of the conference room, trying to present with all the confidence of a man who believed a famous last name could replace skill. Behind him, the Port Authority team watched with folded arms. "All right," he said, clearing his throat. "This is our automated logistics intelligence portal, designed by, as a team effort." His hand hovered above the screen. He clicked once. The entire interface froze. He clicked again, and again. Error messages flooded the display. "Framework license expired. Access key invalid. Core module missing dependencies." A Port Authority representative leaned forward. "Is this part of the demo? No?" Callum snapped. "It is a glitch." Tessa stepped into frame, whispering sharply. "Fix it, Callum, now. I am trying." His voice cracked. "Someone messed with the system." One of the Port Authority leads pushed back his chair. "We are done here. We cannot trust a platform that collapses during a demonstration." Another added, "We expected professionalism. This is unacceptable." As they walked out, someone near the back lifted their phone and quietly recorded Callum's meltdown. By the time I refreshed my screen, the clip was already posted on LinkedIn. Thousands of views, comments piling up. Tessa's voice trembled. "Callum, say something." He pointed at the frozen dashboard. "It is not my fault. She built it. She set this up." I closed the laptop slowly. Would they still blame me once the world realized the truth? My phone rang while I was still staring at the LinkedIn post of Callum's meltdown. I didn't recognize the number, and for a moment I almost ignored it until I saw the caller ID, Evergreen State Medical Network. I answered. "This is Elara." A calm, authoritative voice came through. "Elara Wynn, this is Dr. Miriam Cole from Evergreen. Do you have a moment?" My grip tightened. "Yes, of course. We heard about the demonstration," she said, skipping any pleasantries. "Our internal dashboard has been glitching since last night. We tried contacting SilverPoint, but all they did was blame you." I closed my eyes. "I expected that." "Well, we don't believe them." Her tone sharpened. "You built our triage intelligence system. You trained our staff. You kept everything stable for years. We trust you, not that boy fumbling through a meeting." The words hit me harder than I expected. "Dr. Cole continued, "Can you support us independently? As a contractor or consultant, we would prefer to sever ties with SilverPoint completely." I froze. Legally, I am not sure yet. There are contracts, and I just lost my job yesterday. "We understand the risk," she replied. "But listen carefully. Elara, we will drop SilverPoint immediately. We only want you." The quiet in my apartment felt heavy. For months, I had believed I was barely holding my position together. Tessa made me feel replaceable. Callum treated me like an obstacle. Yet here was a major client, a hospital network that relied on real-time decisions to save lives, choosing me over an entire corporation. "I need some time to review what I can legally do," I finally said. "Take it," Dr. Cole replied. "And when you're ready, call us first." The line went silent. My heart didn't. What happens when the world outside your company values you more than the people inside ever did? The email arrived just after noon, subject line in bold letters that made my stomach tighten. Formal notice from SilverPoint Legal. I opened it with trembling fingers. The letter inside was cold and clinical, accusing me of withholding company assets, sabotaging critical infrastructure, and causing material damage through intentional negligence. At the bottom, Tessa's digital signature glared back at me like a dare. My phone buzzed almost immediately. A message from Callum. "You should just admit what you did. Everyone knows you tanked the demo." I stared at those words until the screen dimmed. Another message appeared, this one from Jonah. "They're making us sign statements saying you refused to document anything. Tessa says if we don't, we're complicit." I'm scared. "Elara," a hot pressure built behind my eyes. "I never did anything to hurt them. I whispered to the empty room. I only tried to protect my work, but fear had a way of twisting every thought. My hands shook as I paced my living room, replaying every warning I'd given SilverPoint, every ignored email, every moment I had backed down to keep my job. Then, with a breath I didn't know I needed, I grabbed my keys and called the first employment attorney in downtown Seattle who could meet the same day. His office was plain, just a desk and a wall of case files. He read through my papers in silence: my employment contract, the licensing agreement, the paperwork for Wynn Analytics. Finally, he leaned back. "Elara," he said, "they cannot accuse you of withholding company assets." My throat felt tight. "Why not?" He tapped the licensing clause. "Because they never owned your framework in the first place. They leased it. You hold the rights. They fired the only person legally authorized to maintain it." The breath left my body in a single, stunned exhale. If the law was finally on my side, how far would they fall once the truth landed my attorney? David Rourke sat across from me in a quiet meeting room overlooking Elliott Bay. The late afternoon light cut a pale line across the table, but neither of us looked at it. He was focused entirely on the documents spread in front of him: my employment contract, the original licensing agreement, and the articles of incorporation for Wynn Analytics. "Elara," he said finally, sliding the papers toward me, "you own the framework outright. SilverPoint never purchased anything. They leased access, nothing more." I swallowed. "And firing me breached their own licensing terms." He tapped the clause with a blunt finger. "They terminated the only certified administrator. They invalidated the contract themselves." A strange stillness settled over me. "So they cannot legally operate the platform at all, not without your consent," he confirmed. "And from the sound of it, they tried anyway." My laptop chimed a reminder of the log alerts still hammering the Wynn Analytics server. I opened a blank message. "Hands steady for the first time in days." I typed "effective immediately." Wynn Analytics does not authorize further use of its proprietary systems, frameworks, or administrative protocols by SilverPoint Systems. Continued operation constitutes an infringement. I signed my name and hit send. David nodded. "It is enough." Within an hour, my phone lit up with internal monitoring alerts. Without authorized keys, the entire SilverPoint infrastructure slid into darkness. Dashboards went offline. Scheduled jobs failed. Authentication loops spun in circles and collapsed. Then came the call. Tessa's number. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice trembled. "Elara, we need to speak. In person." "You fired me," I said calmly. "What could you possibly need now?" A shaky inhale. "Please, come tomorrow. We can discuss terms." The shift was unmistakable. 2 days ago, she ordered me out of the building. Now she was asking for an audience. I ended the call and closed my laptop, the weight in my chest finally easing. What leverage would I wield when I finally stepped back into that building? When I stepped into the same glass-walled conference room where they had fired me, the air felt entirely different. Tessa Ward sat stiffly at the table, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were pale. Callum hovered behind her, shoulders rounded, eyes fixed on the floor. Neither of them spoke. I set my folder down and took the seat at the head of the table. Not the one they used to direct me toward the one they used for people they wanted to impress. "Elara," Tessa began, her voice low. "Thank you for coming. I am here as the Chief Executive Officer of Wynn Analytics," I said quietly. "Not as your former employee?" Callum flinched. Tessa nodded once. "Understood." I opened the contract. "These are the terms under which SilverPoint may regain limited access to the Learning Core framework." Tessa leaned forward. "We need to restore our systems immediately. You will," I said. "But there are conditions." Her jaw tightened. I continued. "First, SilverPoint becomes a client. Nothing more. You will license access from Wynn Analytics on a renewable agreement. Tessa swallowed hard. Fine. Second, Callum does not go near the environment. Not development, not staging, nothing. He is not qualified. Callum's face flushed. You don't need to embarrass me. This is not embarrassment, I replied. This is protection for everyone involved. He looked down again, silence settling over him. Third, I said, sliding the final page forward. Any member of my former team who wishes to join Wynn Analytics is free to do so without retaliation from SilverPoint. Tessa stiffened. That will gut our engineering floor. Then treat your people better. I said, but they get a choice. She stared at the contract, then signed her name. There was no fight left. I stood, gathered my documents, and walked toward the door, the reverse of the last time I had stood in this room. Except now the power sat entirely in my hands. If a single act of courage could end one chapter, what new beginning was waiting for me next? The morning they fired me, they thought I was walking away with nothing. By the end of the week, I owned everything they depended on to survive. 3 days after signing the contract, I unlocked the door to a small office space in Capitol Hill. The place was bright, warm, and open, nothing like the fluorescent maze I had lived in at SilverPoint. Natalie and Jonah stood in the doorway behind me, carrying boxes of their own. This feels unreal, Natalie whispered. It feels earned. I said. Jonah laughed softly. At least this place has actual windows. Their presence steadied something deep inside me. They were not here for a paycheck or because they were trapped by corporate politics. They chose to be here. With me. I spent the morning at a new desk, laptop open. When my phone rang, the caller ID read Evergreen State Medical Network. Dr. Cole's voice was crisp. Elara, the board approved a multi-year contract. Full integration and support. We are ready when you are. Relief washed over me in a way I had not expected. Thank you, Dr. Cole. Truly. After the call, I stepped aside to breathe, letting the weight of everything settle. That was when another call came. My mother, Elara. Her voice was soft, hopeful. I opened the office today. I said, Wynn Analytics is officially real. I could hear her smile. Your father would have been so proud. He always wanted you to build something no one could ever take from you. My throat tightened. I think I finally did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt like a blessing. When I hung up, I walked to the window. Seattle's skyline stretched across the horizon, a patchwork of glass and motion and possibility. I rested my palm against the cool surface, feeling the hum of the city below. SilverPoint had taken my job. They had tried to take my work, my name, my confidence, but they had only cleared the path. If this was only the beginning, what might happen when a woman finally owns her worth?